Hi, I'm Tall Mike Wine. You can call me Mike. Welcome to my podcast. Don't let the name fool you. It is a podcast about wine, but it's also a podcast with just people that love wine, sipping wine, talking, lots of conversation, lots of wine, lots of fun. I hope that's all right. The cell phones have been silenced. The wine has been poured. Go ahead. Get yourself some. We're not going to wait for you, though, so get it quick. And just like that, the podcast begins from the Vintner's Room at Nicholson Ranch Winery in Sonoma, California. I should add the very sparsely furnished Vintner's Room, since all the couches have been moved outside for tasting on the courtyard. Thanks to my set designer, John Guinea, for setting us up with chairs in here today and a small table to set the wine on. This is episode 6 of the Tall Mike Wine Podcast. My name is Mike Stone, your host. If you're finding us for the first time, you have some catching up to do, because now we have 6 episodes, or we're about to have 6 episodes. And thank you for finding us. The podcast is now heard in 27 states. Thank you, Idaho. 3 continents, 8 countries, from Anchorage, Alaska to Atlanta, Georgia, and in between. Ohio, New Jersey, Missouri, Colorado. Great numbers, continuing to grow. Oh, and Jeff Reed is listening in Ballard, which is an area of Seattle. He was the first emailer for the Coasters offer. Thank you, Jeff. Ballard was an old Norwegian fishing village. Now it's a village full of hipsters, or so they tell me. My guest this time is a chef with whom I had the pleasure to work back in the day. There was a restaurant where I was the wine guy. My guest was the executive chef. Life was good. After a couple of years, I moved on to find another restaurant, which turned out to be a disaster, of which there have been actually a lot in my 20 years in restaurants. My guest stayed on until the end. We're going to talk about the end, because I'm still curious. And I'll get this straight skinny on what went down at the Lark Creek restaurant in Walnut Creek. Chef Scott Wall is here. Hello.
Hello there. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you.
This is great.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, what a spot you got up here.
We're here at the winery. It's kind of a cloudy day. There's been rain on and off. But yeah, it's beautiful here, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Any time of the year, I feel.
Anytime you can get out to the vineyards is nice. It's true. We have people listening all over that part of the East Bay where we used to work together. And you still live, right? You're still out there?
Absolutely. My drive-in today was about 36 minutes. It was great.
Concord, Danville, Pleasant Hill. Lots of Nicholson Ranch Wine Club people out that way. And I'm sure they remember Lark Creek. So let's just jump right into it.
All right.
What the hell happened? I know that the original partners, Chef Bradley Ogden and his friend Michael Deller, built the group from the ground up. They started with the Lark Creek Inn in Larkspur in Marin County. And then they opened Walnut Creek. And then years and years and years later, they had, 7 restaurants, 8 restaurants?
I believe so, yeah. I think possibly I always heard the number 9 going around there.
All right.
If you counted the Las Vegas Bradley Ogden project that happened for a while.
Bradley had his restaurant in Las Vegas. They had the seafood places.
Yes, the Yankee Piers.
Yankee Pier. And then let's pick the story up. In what year? When they sold everything?
I want to say that had to be about 2015.
Okay, and you were still there.
I was still there,
and
yes.
You started with Lark Creek right out of culinary school, right?
I did. I started as a extern, as you would call it, working the wood oven station.
Extern,
yes.
intern. It's good exercise.
I can still remember my first night there. It was much different than culinary school, where you would have 3 or 4 students tag teaming a recipe that you're learned for a few hours. And I got thrown right into the fire. Literally, I was working the wood oven station. And I think that night I left, my entire chef coat was covered in black soot and my apron as well. And I probably had some on my face and hands also.
I'll bet the inside of that chef's coat was like drenched in sweat.
Yes. Yeah. It was a rough night.
You were sweating it.
And it was the heyday of restaurants in Walnut Creek. At the time, there was probably 3 big hitters. We were busy every day.
What year was that?
That was 2000.
That was the year 2000.
Yes.
And then you became the executive chef when I was there in 2006?
Yeah, 2007.
Okay. And then
when
it all came crashing down.
Well, it kind of came crashing down right when I became the executive chef, in fact.
No.
As far as the economy and things like that, I remember those days.
I guess that's true.
2008 was a rough year.
I left in 2008. No, I left at the end of 2007 to move up here and open a restaurant in Santa Rosa for some people. Wow. And then the economy crashed.
Yes. And I thought being a new executive chef, new promotion, I thought it was all my fault. But
of course it was.
Cheesecake Factory had just moved to town, and all these restaurants were popping up.
So the landscape, the restaurant landscape in Walnut Creek shifted.
It did.
And the economy crashed because of the stock market.
Right.
Lark Creek restaurant was not as much of a thing.
Fortunately, it was only about a year or two where that was kind of the case, and we had bounced back considerably. And, my last 5-6 years working there were great. I mean, we were always constantly busy and, had a good private party business and things like that.
The food was always good.
Food was always good. We always had our regulars.
Now, we come to around what year? 2017, 18? And the Lark Creek Restaurant Group is sold.
Oh, it had to be a little bit sooner than that. Probably 2000, because I left in the end right in the beginning of 2016. Okay. So it was probably sold in 2015.
So they sell the group, a little restaurant group gets bought by a little bigger restaurant group.
Correct.
And then this bigger restaurant group came in. Bum, 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 bum,
yes.
bum.
And this is the way I like to put it. We were the golden child at the Lark Creek Restaurant Group. All of our profitability and success afforded them to open, like we said, 7-9 different restaurants, all with different concepts.
Sure.
All brand new builds. And
there was the steak restaurant.
There was.
In San Francisco.
As executive chef, I had a considerable discount at all of those restaurants. And it afforded me to bring 3 of my favorite guests with me each time as well. So I had some pretty memorable nights at those places.
I think I got to go with you one time.
Yeah.
Then the company that bought the Lark Creek Restaurant Group, that's the Moana Restaurant Group.
The Moana Restaurant Group,
okay.
Correct. And they've had some good, reputable restaurants. And the closest one, I think, to us in Walnut Creek was Piatti in Danville.
Okay.
And then they even swallowed up some more after they purchased Lark Creek. But anyhow, back to what I was saying, we were the golden child at Lark Creek. And then when Moana came in, we were downgraded to the redheaded stepchild.
Oh, it's a family dynamic, Scott. This just happens.
We were looked at as, and this is opinion, and this is discussion that we had amongst managers. We were looked at as older clientele's restaurant. And the good part about it, they were kind of hands off. We were used to a regimen run by our corporation at the time, by the folks in the mighty Ivory Tower.
The Ivory Tower,
as you quoted many times. Part of our success was a lot of the different themes that we did throughout the year.
Sure.
In particular, the Half Price Wine Month. And a lot of that stuff went away or wasn't required by us anymore because they were such a hands-off attitude with us at the time.
How long into the new ownership did you depart?
Oh, probably about a year or so. Personally, in my life, I was looking to pursue a different career at the time. I actually was looking into law enforcement, and part of the application process, I'm sure along the lines, had to contact the Moana people, and they probably weren't too happy that I was looking elsewhere. That, I'm sure, came up. It was just not really the best fit anymore. We kind of mutually parted ways at the time.
Mutually parting of the ways.
Yes. We can be candid about this and say I was probably their highest paid chef in their group.
That's possible.
Considering the time that I had spent there. I kind of took the path that most chefs don't take, and I stayed with the company for 15 years.
So they weren't really dying to keep you around?
Probably not.
Okay. So you moved on. And then how much longer after that? Did they close the Lark Creek restaurant?
Yeah. Well, we kind of saw that writing was going to be there. They sold Lark Creek because the company wasn't, necessarily making money anymore. I just remember purveyors calling me and telling me that they couldn't deliver my product anymore because we weren't really up to terms. So I believe it lasted about a year after I left.
And then it just shut down.
It
was gone. Yeah. Oh, cue the sad music.
Yeah. In fact, it was one of those cases where you show up to work. And I heard this because a lot of my former employees, some of my former employees stuck around and worked in the kitchen. And it was one of those cases where you come into work and your paycheck's ready for you.
Oh.
And there's a desk set up, or in this case, maybe one of the tables, maybe it was table 16 or something that the new
even remember the table number. You're really you're stretching.
Oh, if we put you back in the restaurant, you'd bounce back. You'd know them all.
I just have to put a tie on and my
so you had to go up to table 16 instead of clocking in and grab your check and hit the road.
Well, at least there were checks.
Yes.
And they didn't show up to a note on the door. We're closed.
Right.
Good luck tracking us down.
Yeah. I've heard that story as well, too, with restaurants in Walnut Creek.
We talk about the East Bay. Walnut Creek is in the East Bay. If you're not familiar with the greater Bay Area, is Oakland and Berkeley, which are right at the edge of the Bay, San Francisco Bay. And then if you go further east, you hit suburbia.
Yes, you do.
You go through a tunnel, through some hills to the area we're talking about. How would you describe it to, say, Oakland?
How would I describe
the whole, East Bay, the Walnut Creek area?
Very affluent community, younger families kind of just getting started, great housing market, great parks and recreation services, lots of hiking and trails, but kind of an up-and-coming, newer money type atmosphere, I would think.
It's definitely a wealthier area.
Yes. Affluent, I think that was the first word that I that I came up with.
Affluent, I don't know. That just sounds too complicated to me.
It can be.
You're an East Bay native?
I am. Yes.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Danville and San Ramon, not too far from the Lark Creek. You really grew up
very, very close to the restaurant.
I did.
That's crazy.
Yes, I did. And that's kind of where I landed. I moved a lot in my early childhood, mainly in Northern California.
Okay.
There was a small stint in Reno, Nevada that I remember when I was about 4. But yeah, I call myself an East Bay native. That's where I graduated high school and kind of landed and rooted myself.
Okay. We talked about you briefly in episode 2. Do you remember?
I do remember. Yeah, that was great.
Your sports affiliation.
Yes.
Odd to me. As I mentioned before, you're an A's fan for baseball.
Yes.
But not a Raiders fan. Instead, you are a Niners fan.
Yes.
Please explain.
Okay. Well, that's easy. That's an easy one to explain.
Really?
In fact, it's funny that it came up because my brother texted me this morning about it. I was somewhat brainwashed into a Niners fan. My father was an athlete in high school. He went to high school in Oakland, St. Elizabeth High School. And he was highly recruited for basketball, but not, he was a really good football player as well, but he didn't get any scholarships for football. But he did end up going to Gonzaga University for basketball.
Gonzaga.
He only spent about 2 years there, didn't get a lot of playing time, and came back down to the Bay Area, and he tried out for the 49ers. He somehow decided to keep going with football and give it a try. And
wait, what sport did he play at Gonzaga?
Basketball.
Okay, that's what I thought you said.
Yeah, that's what he was recruited for.
Like, excuse me, the basketball team is in another town.
Wrong team here, buddy. No, he was a two-sport athlete. I'm not quite sure at the time what inclined him to go try out for the 49ers, but anyhow, he did do a mini camp with them, and he was signed to a contract to go further on into training camp. Didn't end up working out. He was actually cut for medical reasons that he actually ended up passing away of medical reasons, heart related. And at the time, from the story that he told us, it was one of the first years that they started testing for heart conditions, like heart murmurs and things like that. And that was the reason that they gave him for cutting him. They said, you won't be able to take a hit out here without possibly causing some serious damage.
You'll die.
Exactly.
We don't need that. Our insurance company won't let you play for us.
Right. And this was back in, they were still playing at Kezar at the time. This was the 60s, I believe.
This is before Candlestick Park?
Oh, yeah. This is before the Joe Montanas and
you weren't even born yet.
No.
Well, this is your dad before he was your dad.
Right. This is my dad in his early 20s. Yeah, he was a free agent. Yeah, before my mom as well.
Your dad yet?
That's another story in another podcast.
Well, athletes,
So my brother actually texted me this morning because he found the original contract. He thought that something had happened to it, and he was digging through some boxes or something, and so he sent me a picture of it and wants to get it, recopied and formatted for us to look at. So we do have the contract.
So your dad went to camp?
Yes.
But didn't actually play.
Didn't actually play, didn't see any playing time, but that is the reason that I was brainwashed into
okay.
Being a 49ers fan.
He was a lifetime Niner fan after that.
Yes.
All right. So that's why you're an A's fan.
Right.
And a Niners fan.
Yes.
Even though you live in the East Bay.
Yes. And he was at a lot of the Reggie Jackson games and the
World Series.
Yeah. So he same as me, A's and Niners fans. So that's kind of how we grew up. And then of course at the age where I really became into sports and where you start to pick sports players as your heroes, right. The Bash Brothers were right there. 1988, 1989. Jose Canseco, Mark McGuire.
I hope we get to go to an A's game again this year.
They have some tickets available.
Do they?
Yeah. They're going to have some rules. Wear your mask to get in and keep it on until you get to your seat and start drinking and eating.
Okay. Scott and I went to an A's game together about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And the Mariners got clobbered.
They did.
But I try and go to see the Mariners when they come down and play Oakland.
Yes.
And it's a nice thing to be able to see my team, my hometown team.
Yeah. And what's even better is they play them multiple times a year down here.
They're in the same division. It's lots of games.
Yes. And they get those afternoon games a lot. Midweek afternoon games.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Let's go back to we already did that part. The very beginning. East Bay native. Get rid of that page of the notes.
There it goes. All right. We're moving right along here.
Let's talk about this wine you brought.
Okay. Great.
Something Scott has been telling me about is he is working... not in a restaurant anymore, but he's still a chef, did some private chefing for some families, and he's been doing some freelance work for a winery in the East Bay. There's this big wine region called Livermore Valley. It gets hot as blazes out there.
It does.
Oh my God. I've been out there a few times in the summer. It's so hot. So this is a winery in Livermore called Dante Robere.
Yes.
Do I have to roll my R when I say that?
You should, yes.
Dante Robere.
Yes, you want to do things properly. That's perfect.
Robere. And this is a wine called Purgatorio. What can you tell me about Purgatorio?
Personally, of the wines that I taste there, I've never really had a bad one. And this is the one that stands out the most for me. It's always been really, really good. It's a blend of Cabernet and Petite Sirah.
50-50.
50-50 blend.
Cab and Petite Sirah.
Livermore grapes.
Dante Robere.
They're just great people out there. Small winery. They're off the beaten path. If you were to look at Livermore, you would see heavy hitters such as Wente and Concannon. They're down the road a ways. Brand new tasting room. Mm-hmm. You know, they built the place from the ground up. It's on a great little lot. Plenty of room to go in there and taste wine. And owner ran and operated.
Okay.
Which is great. And they are the winemakers as well.
Oh.
Yes.
That sounds very similar to another winery I know of.
Yeah, they are Dan and Bob, which gives you the Dante Robere.
Dan and Bob.
Yes.
Dante Robere. It's not as heavy as I thought it might be. A blend of Cabernet and Petite Sirah, which are both big grapes.
Yes.
Big wine grapes.
Yes, they tend to focus on Rhone varietals there.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So they're into the big reds. And
this is not Rhone varietals. The Petite Sirah. Cabernet is definitely not.
Okay.
Cabernet is a Bordeaux varietal.
Oh, that's what I meant. Oh, silly me. No.
Bordeaux varietals. Okay. We can edit that part out.
You probably should. Flex in here, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's all right. Cabernet is a Bordeaux varietal. Petite Sirah is not. Petite Sirah is just sort of grown in certain parts of France, and they don't call it Petite Sirah. That's an American invention.
Wow.
The name of the grape we call Petite Sirah in France is Durif. Not a very sexy name. I'm sure if you're French, it sounds sexy to you, but
leave it to those Americans to take something that was working and change it to their own, right?
The story I heard was that there was a vineyard planted to Syrah, and then next to it was another vineyard planted to these grapes that looked like Syrah, only they were smaller.
Oh.
So they started calling it Petite Sirah.
Well, there you go.
So they started selling this wine called Petite Sirah, and life was good until some French guy showed up and spoiled everything. You know, he shows up and they're like, here, would you like to try our Petite Sirah? And he says, this is not a Petite Sirah. This grape is called Durif.
That's great right there.
You like that?
Yes. I feel like I'm really, that's exactly what happened. That's great.
So, yeah, some French guy came and busted him and said, hey,
okay,
this is not Petite Sirah. There's no such thing. This is Durif.
Wow.
It's a descendant of Syrah. Syrah crossed with another grape. French call it Durif. Here in California, they started calling it Petite Sirah, and you got all this wine out there in the world called Petite Sirah. You're not going to just change it.
I wonder how the French feel about that when they see it on label.
Who cares? They've got their own wine over there. They do what they want to do. Scott Wall is here. Now I want to know, what inspired you to go to culinary school? You went to the CCA, is that right?
Yes.
California Culinary Academy.
Correct.
That's up here.
No. The California Culinary Academy was in San Francisco. Much like most of the things that I touch, it's destroyed and ruined now. No, I'm kidding.
Scott, just stop it.
No, but it is no longer a school that's teaching chefs to cook.
Oh, I'm thinking of the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, which is in the Napa Valley.
Right.
So CCA, San Francisco, you went there when you were how old?
I went there when I was 19. And it was a 16-month program. I believe I just turned 21. So I'd finished somewhere around that age group there.
So you were able to go get a job in a restaurant and, like all chefs, drink a lot.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, they had a bar right across the street. And I remember being able to go to that bar with everybody.
Oh, that's
because
nice
I had just turned 21. It was a nice Irish bar. And that's where I discovered Black and Tans.
Oh.
Little harp with Guinness floater.
What led you to culinary school? What was it about your life that got you to culinary school?
Well, food has always been a big part of our family. We've always enjoyed eating. I always enjoyed cooking at an early age. Both of my parents worked. Between us, 4 siblings that grew up together, we were all very close in age. We had to cook for ourselves during summer vacations and summer breaks and things like that. So, I wasn't afraid of cooking and enjoyed it. And
you weren't just popping those things in the toaster. What do you call them?
Pop-Tarts.
Pop-Tarts.
No, but I did make a lot of boxed mac and cheese.
Okay.
But I also doctored it up, too.
I was just going to say,
yes.
I'll bet you started out by doctoring up macaroni and cheese.
Yep.
I used to live with this guy when I was like 19. He made the mac and cheese, but he would slice up hot dogs and put them in the mac and cheese. And that was like,
yeah.
That's super, super gourmet.
That's a version of doctoring up, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I would always add more cheese to it.
More cheese?
Yeah.
What about, I would add garlic powder.
Oh, that's a great one.
Now you'd add a little bit of sriracha.
Oh, there's countless combinations for mac and cheese nowadays.
So you're there. You've got 4 kids. They're all cooking. Were you rising to the top as like the chef of the family?
It wasn't really a competition at the time. Like I said, it was probably just started with mac and cheese at that point.
Okay.
What really kind of got me my foot in the door and seeing how professional kitchens operate was my godmother, who was always running restaurants her entire life. And she got me bussing tables when I was 14 at a small pasta restaurant in Danville. She was dating the owner-manager at the time, and she would work the front door on weekends for him, and then eventually kind of took over his books and things like that.
Dating the restaurant manager.
It was kind of a
could be trouble.
Important time in my life to keep me involved in something. My father had passed away when I was 12, and so by this time I was 14, and it gave me something to do, and she wanted to teach me, working part of things and how to save money and stuff like that. So she set up a bank account with me on my first couple paychecks that I got, which was cool. I would work Friday and Saturdays and some Sundays occasionally at 14. And the deal that they cut with me at 14, and the deal that they cut with me was minimum wage at the time was $5 an hour. So they paid me $2.50 an hour because I was under the legal working age.
So they treated you like a slave.
Essentially. But I did get tips. So at the end of the night, I would usually walk with, $40 or $50 on tips. I don't quite remember. And I did get to eat. And so me being the food guy and loving food, and I got to actually go back and order my food. And I can still remember she would have me write the ticket, because I think the chefs, as some chefs can be, a little stubborn and wanted to make sure that the food had a ticket. So I would write my little ticket, and she would have me put an X on it, which meant order fire, and bring it back to the cooks. And I remember the first time that I did that, I walked back there and the chef looked at me, and he's like, he just looked like, who do you think you are, sort of thing. And I hung my ticket on the little thing,
you down
and then walked away. And then eventually, after a couple months of doing that, I was able to go back there and actually watch him make my food and help cook my pasta and stuff like that. So that's kind of always where I gravitated towards. At the end of the night, I was mainly hungry at the most part,
right,
and wanted to get back there and see the food part of it. I was just intrigued with the big pots of boiling water constantly going to drop their pasta in,
right,
and the flames and the yelling and screaming. And they used to heat the bread for us.
Okay.
Part of my job as the busboy was to do bread. And so they would have to heat the bread. And I remember him reaching in there and seeing that he burned it and throwing them across the kitchen and being all mad at us because we didn't come back and get the bread. And I just thought, well, this is much more exciting than what I'm doing out here.
I bet that was an education for a 14-year-old.
Yes, it was.
Because I always like to hang out in the kitchen too, but it's definitely, things back there are rated R.
They are.
You're not going to let the chefs babysit the little kids back there.
No, not at all.
Because they're going to learn some bad words and some bad habits.
So my godmother, I think she noticed that I, enjoyed what was going on back there, and she planted the seed of culinary school as an option because the two chefs that were working there in the back had both gone to the culinary academy as well.
Okay.
So fast forward, got out of high school. I tried a little bit of junior college just to see if I would like it. And then my best friend at the time, one night hanging out with him, was all excited to tell us that he got accepted to the culinary academy completely out of the blue. Thought I knew this guy so well. We hung out every day. And then he hits me with, he's going to the culinary academy. And I'm like floored. I'm like, wait a second. I was supposed to do that.
Chef.
I was supposed to go to the culinary academy, not you. And so I started.
Did you know that he had even applied?
Had no idea. And I probably hung out with him 3 or 4 times a week at this time.
Had you ever had his mac and cheese?
I had not. And I had no idea that he even cooked.
Really?
And that he had this interest in him.
You think you know a guy.
I know. So 6 months after he started, I started the culinary academy. So we were always a little bit behind each other, but he got me the internship at Lark Creek because it was his father-in-law's favorite restaurant.
The word I always hear chefs and people who talk about chefs talk about the life. It is a hard life, but it is a rewarding life.
Rewarding is great, and it does wonders for your morale and for your, confidence, and you're always a great conversation piece at parties. But at the same time, there is something to be said for having a little bit of freedom in life, a little bit of knowing when you're going to get off work, knowing that when you take a vacation that you don't have to be glued to that email that's coming from the ivory tower to know how bad the Saturday night went that you weren't there. That was always my most dreaded part. Sitting somewhere at Disneyland or something and in the hotel room finally at 11:30, checking my phone, and then the comp report comes through. Long wait, customer complaint, cold this, hot this.
Oh, God.
Needless to say, I don't miss that.
That's, when I first started, actually, when I was a kid, I was always into cooking myself. And somebody said, oh, you're going to be a chef one day. And I even thought back then, I'm like, no, chefs work too hard.
Wow. You got a great head on your shoulders at such a young age.
I accidentally fell into work in the front of the house via the wine connection. I immediately like, well, this is fun up here where all the people are. This is where the party is.
Yeah.
But again, you go back to the kitchen. It's a different world.
It is.
It's a little scary, but a lot of fun. And that's where the food is.
Right.
So that's always a nice place to be.
Yes. If you work in a restaurant, at some point, you're going to have to get involved in the kitchen and get acquainted with the folks in the kitchen because you need to eat.
That's right.
Or you need your food to serve your customers.
Or you need wine glasses right now.
Yes.
I need wine glass. I need some silverware.
Yes, rapido.
That's why you'd find me back there by the dishwasher being nice to him.
That's right.
Speaking all the Spanish I could muster.
Yes, that was podcast 2, wasn't it?
We talked about that on
yeah,
podcast
we did.
too.
Yeah, that was
my
great.
Spanish word salads.
I thought that's where my shout out was going to be, but it ended up being my affiliation with my sports dynasties of the Bay Area.
Let me tell you, Scott's command of the Spanish language for a big white guy is astonishing.
And that is, I attribute much of my success at Lark Creek Restaurant because the fact that I took Spanish in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade.
Whoa.
And I have these daydreams every once in a while of going back to my sophomore Spanish teacher, Senora Huffman, and having a conversation with her with all the new words that I know.
No! Don't do it!
It's just a daydream.
She'll be shocked.
But
she'll be clutching her chest.
Yes, but
you'll send her off to Purgatorio.
That was some great, right? That was some great guidance that I had from my older siblings who told me, when I was entering junior high, they said, no, you should take the Spanish classes now because you won't have to take them later, and we can always help you because we've already taken them.
That's teamwork, right?
It is teamwork, and it worked out great for me because I didn't touch Spanish for a long time until I got into the restaurant business, and then it all came back to me. I tell you, when you speak someone's language and you're able to communicate with them, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, the first few times I heard you talking to the guys on the line at Lark Creek, I was like, oh my God.
Who is this guy?
This guy's really, he knows how to hablo like Pablo.
That's right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you went from we're going to switch this topic here. This is what we do on podcasts. We go from topic to topic.
No rules.
That's
no
right.
rules.
You went from being a fat chef to being a fit chef.
I did.
A few years ago. We worked together. You were the stereotypical happy, chubby chef. Not uncommon. In fact, if I were a chef with all that food around, all the stress, I would be a crazy fat person.
Yes.
And still, this is how many years later? You're still very svelte. And
Thank you.
Very chiseled.
Yes.
So you lost a lot of weight. How much weight did you lose, and how did you do it?
You found my Instagram handle there. That's great.
Yes.
A Fit Chef.
A Fit Chef.
I lost about 115 pounds.
My God.
It was a lot of weight.
So how much did you weigh when I knew you?
I'm not quite sure the exact amount, but I know that my heaviest being on a scale was probably about 330 pounds. And about 6'2". I carried it well. Yeah, right. Just kidding.
Could have played for the Niners.
I could have, yes. I could have been an offensive lineman like my father tried to be. It was getting to be time, definitely, for me to do it. I was starting to notice the problems that come along with carrying that much weight.
How old were you?
I was about 27 when I started getting serious about my journey.
Thinking about, I got to peel some of this off.
Yes.
This is baggage.
Yeah.
This is
there had been a long time. I had started working out when I was about 24, going to a gym. In fact, I remember it was, there was a 24-hour that opened in San Ramon at the time, and that's kind of where I was living. Now I started playing basketball and going on the treadmill and stuff like that, but nothing was really budging. And so I hadn't weighed myself in a long time, and I was at that scale at that gym when I weighed myself, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's why you haven't weighed yourself in a long time.
You were over 300 pounds.
Yes, and if you look at my culinary picture, I had been big my whole life. That was always my struggle,
You're
obesity.
A stocky guy, for sure.
Yeah. I was obese my entire childhood. I never had restrictions as far as what I could eat, or I always ate what I wanted. Mm-hmm. It's always just kind of been my thing. Scott's been the big guy.
So you started exercising, but that doesn't really cut it. When you're 300 plus pounds, you can start running marathons.
Yeah.
But you got to change your diet.
You got to change what you're putting in, and you got to change your habits.
So what happened? What was the epiphany with your food?
It was kind of a movement, I feel, that was going on. It was right around the same time where organic, lighter meals started to come into play. I worked at the perfect restaurant for it because we were seasonal, farm fresh, heavily driven on produce. We had heirloom tomato festivals, and we had, pumpkin festivals and stuff like that.
Super fresh food all the time.
Right.
Lots of organic veggies
everything made from
in.
scratch. So it was very easy to take out certain ingredients such as cream and butter, and leaving out the pastas, leaving out the tortillas, stuff like that. And then unfortunately, I hate to say it, but alcohol was was a lot of the driving force behind that as well. Not necessarily the drinking of the alcohol, which I'm sure was a lot of it because I was kind of a beer and bourbon guy.
Right.
But it was all the bad habits that come along with that.
Right.
The decisions that you make at 2 a.m. in the morning when it's, that you need to be to work the next day, and you want to soak some of this beer and bourbon up with something. And usually that was Jack in the Box or some sort of 24-hour option.
Right. And that's
out there.
That's eating that food at the worst possible time of day.
Correct. And
right
going
before
to bed.
bedtime.
Yes.
With a liver full of alcohol,
Right.
which slows your metabolism way, way down.
Mm-hmm. With the genes that I've been given at birth
There you
anyhow.
go.
So yeah, it was a lot of combinations that I was facing. So
Exercise. You switched your diet up a little bit.
yeah, I cut out the alcohol for a long time.
Okay.
I still, to this day, I probably only drink once or twice a week anyhow. And up until a few years ago, there was many times where I didn't drink for months at a time.
It is a lot of calories. It's
It
something
is.
that I think people that work with alcohol or wine specifically, of course, we know that it is
Yes.
caloric, but
Yeah, there's a burger in every beer.
Is there?
Yeah,
a burger in every beer.
there is. case you're hungry and you don't have a burger around, you just grab a beer.
Just have a beer instead. I like that. Don't have both, though.
So yeah, this all kind of happened when I was 27. It took me about 13 months or so to lose all of the weight. And I was the executive chef at the time at Lark Creek still. I got a lot of really good publicity from it. You know, the Ivory Tower there had a really strong PR team that would do a lot of news releases for the company and handle those sort of things.
Fit Chef was a big thing.
Yes. Contra Costa Times newspaper. I feel like I probably went on TV also. I used to do a couple Bay Area news shows.
Oh, with Spencer Christian.
Yes.
I think I remember seeing one or two of those.
View from the Bay was the show.
Right.
And it was actually a really cool, popular show. It aired right before Oprah.
Spencer Christian, if you're listening, come on the podcast. Get him up here.
Yeah.
I know he's a wine geek. He's a total wine geek.
He would fit right in. He would be a really good guest.
How many pounds did you lose?
About 115.
Unbelievable.
And I'll tell you, firsthand experience here, keeping it off is a little bit harder than taking it off.
Really?
Yeah. Maintaining the weight once you've reached a goal and you've set your kind of standard of where you want to be.
Right.
It is much harder because immediately you want to revert back to,
right.
Oh, I'm skinny now, or I'm the fit chef. I can have this, I can have that. I'll tell you, my wife and I did a lot of traveling as skinny people because she kind of went on her own personal journey when I met her as well. That's one of the main things that her and I had in common. She had already lost 100 pounds when I met her. And we didn't even know that. There wasn't dating apps at the time where you could plug in and say, I want to meet somebody that's lost 100 pounds, which I'm sure you can do now. All these algorithms and stuff out there. You can. I'm sure there's a filter out there that'll tell you that. So her and I went to Paris. We were engaged, but we weren't married. I think we called it our pre-honeymoon. We were getting married soon, but we went to Paris and we didn't have one single baguette because we were that strict at the time.
Wow.
And we didn't have one single French pastry.
All that cheese.
Or anything. We did have cheese, plenty of cheese.
Okay.
Yeah, we never went vegan. We never did.
Just no cheese with the baguette.
Right. We never did the bread and the grains and the pastas and stuff like that. And this was all before you called it paleo, before you called it all the titles that there are now. We just ate very heavily protein-based.
Okay. And everything was okay.
Right. Everything was okay. But
awesome.
That was the hard work because you had to keep it off. You had to go to Paris and not have baguettes if you wanted to stay skinny.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing with dieting. If you call it a diet, that means, it's temporary. I'm going to do this for a couple of months and then back to the same old stuff, back to the Burger King at 4 a.m.
Yes.
And you're...
And I have slipped. There has been times where I have slipped in the 10 years or so that I've lost the weight. Mm-hmm. We went on another sort of lifestyle change and we lost about, I think it was 40 pounds I had to lose, and she had to lose some weight also. Yeah,
Jessica.
That's the challenging part.
Scott's lovely wife is Jessica.
Yes.
And I want to talk about something you did a few years ago. Scott and his wife have a young child. What's his name?
Maverick.
I was going to say that, but I couldn't quite remember. Before they got married, Scott proposed.
Yes.
Not any old proposal, though.
No.
You didn't take her out into the woods on a hiking trail or take her to a nice restaurant.
Or to the wine country in Nicholson Ranch.
To a beautiful winery with a pond and a dock and, get a secluded area and get down on your knees and say, Jessica, will you please? Scott went to L.A., hired a flash mob and proposed right in the middle of Universal Studios. The video is on YouTube. How do I find the video?
Simple. Key in search words, Scott and Jessica's flash mob. And it should be like the first video that pops up.
How did you do that? Because it's amazing.
Yes.
Because they follow you with a camera.
Right.
And there's graphics. So this must have been a team of dozens of people.
Yes.
Okay.
And I always butcher the word, but they had a team of cinematographers.
There
we go. I got it out. The wine's helping. And that was part of their deal and their selling point is they produced this entire movie quality video for you.
Where did you get the idea?
The idea came from her, actually. Oh. And Jessica is a woman to this day that will tell you what she wants and how she wants it. And
that's kind of being redundant. Telling me that she's a woman.
All women do that. That's right. My bad. Well, she was the first woman to tell me that.
All right.
She was kind of my first major love. I'm not afraid to say that. So anyhow, she had expressed to me many times that her engagement was more important to her than her wedding. Didn't need the big wedding, and our wedding speaks true to that because we had a small little wedding in our backyard with like 70 people. So she always told me that she wanted the engagement to be huge and something that she'll remember. And at the time, there was a really popular show on Fox called Glee.
Okay.
And the two main characters of that had just done a flash mob. This was coinciding at the same time where flash mobs were starting to take off. In fact, Howie Mandel hosted a show on TV where they did surprise flash mobs for a while.
Oh.
Kind of a reality show.
Okay.
She saw this episode, she showed it to me, and she said, I just love that. I want that. Like, that's, that would be amazing. Like, don't you think this is great? And so I took that information from her.
She was not implying about the engagement, right?
She was, because the whole flash mob from that episode was based on the main character proposing to his fiance at the time.
Okay.
And it was to the same song that she loved. It was a Rihanna song. You'll see, folks, when you check it out. Get those views up, because I think it's only at 600,000 right now.
This thing went viral.
It did.
Went viral.
It did. I was on Henry Tannenbaum. I was on TV for that too.
Who's Henry Tannenbaum?
Oh, you don't know Henry Tannenbaum?
I don't know who Henry Tannenbaum is.
He does like little spots on Cron TV, Channel 4. Yeah, he's kind of
watch a lot of TV
small news personality from more popular in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
And early 2000s.
So you contacted somebody in LA.
Yes.
And they just got the ball rolling.
Yeah, that was their whole deal.
They said,
I think
you
it
write
was
us a check, we'll do everything else.
Exactly.
That's kind of the impression I get.
Exactly. And it was great.
But
I booked it all.
Very cool. You guys are just walking
I told them what song I wanted.
There's a song playing, and pretty soon there are people kind of like goofing on you guys, like
random people
sort of dancing,
yeah.
And then all of a sudden everybody's dancing,
and then the music hits, and they took the whole lead with it. They were affiliated with the folks at City Walk in Universal Studios, so they were able to get whatever licensing or permission they needed from them. We were down in LA. I had the ring in my pocket the whole time. Jessica designed the ring. She knew I had it. She knew something was coming, but I don't think she knew that it was coming right then or that day.
She sure seemed surprised.
Yes, she was.
That's awesome.
I took a lot of heat from it from single guys and guys that are in relationships right now.
Macho guys.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? You set the bar too high. How am I going to top that? And I said, sorry.
That's funny. Let's sip this second wine.
What are we into now? We're into...
I brought a wine from home, my private stash.
Wow.
I like to say my cellar, but I don't have a cellar. I have a very large wine rack in my living room. It's very large. People that don't drink wine come to my house and see the wine rack and they just go,
wow.
And I say, I get thirsty sometimes. This is a Syrah from France.
Wow.
This is the very southern part of France, southeastern, close to the Mediterranean. It's so far south in France that some of the things associated with this region are actually Spanish. In fact, the region that this wine comes from is called Cotes Catalanes.
A lot of influence from their neighbors, I see.
Exactly. In fact, France and Spain, 500 years ago, there were lots of wars and battles and things like that. So this is a Syrah from a winery called Chateau de Leu. That's L''OU. Le.
It's wonderful. It's great.
It is French. And the wine is called Secret de Schistes.
Wow.
Schistes. Schist is the name of the soil that they have there in this specific region. It's this shaly, rocky, like laminated rock that you wouldn't even imagine you could even grow things in. So they're growing wine grapes in this soil. So it stresses them out pretty good.
Okay.
So you get this nice, darker colored, concentrated Syrah. It's quite lovely. This is from 2017. So I think it's still kind of young, but it's delicious. You like it?
I do.
Good.
It's got a nice coating to it, little spice on the back of the tongue there. Really good.
What sort of food would you pair with this, Scott?
I would definitely go into the something braised, something with a nice, maybe a rich mushroom broth.
Oh.
Maybe a braised lamb shank. Would go good with that. Maybe porcini dust the lamb shank before you seared it.
Okay.
And then introduce all sorts of carrots and celery and onion and red wine. And
can we serve it on polenta?
Yes, you have to.
Maybe with some blue cheese.
Yes. I think that might be a law in California. Lamb shank must be served with polenta.
And a demi-glaze.
Yes. You got to have the demi-glaze. Well, that rich broth that I'm speaking of with the mushrooms would become your demi-glaze, right? Because you would remove your lamb shank.
Okay.
And you would want to reduce that down and start coating that lamb shank. And once it gets
When
down.
does it go from being a glaze to being a demi-glaze?
Well, I think classically, if you want to make a demi-glaze in the French eyes, you would need to use brown sauce, which is thickened with flour also, into your demi-glaze. But to me, I've always felt that, those words kind of go hand in hand. Glaze, demi-glaze, and glaze. When it starts to coat the back of the spoon and it starts to shine.
It's getting thick.
Yes, and then you throw that little knob of butter in there at the end. That's when you've got your demi-glaze.
Okay. This is actually leading into what I had written down here.
Okay.
Food and wine pairings. If we have a chef on the show, we have to talk about food and wine pairings.
Absolutely.
It's a wine podcast with a chef. We had wine dinners at Lark Creek. Wineries would come. We'd put on the fancy, matching the food and the wines for sometimes 5 courses.
Yes.
Oh, the pageantry. Typically, the wineries come a few weeks out, pour a few wines for the chef, and then the menu is created. What are some things that are easy for you to explain in terms of food and wine pairing? I mean, you just paired some lovely food with this wine we're sipping, but like somebody pours you a wine, where do you go if somebody says, okay, we're pouring wine for a potential wine dinner.
Okay.
And you're sipping a bunch of wines. Where do you go in your brain to get like the flavors and then the food that you want to pair with these things?
Well, I think for me, I have the most success with not trying to make it too complicated.
Okay.
You want to match flavors that are going to blend well together and not cancel each other out, I would say.
Okay.
And then
so taking a lamb shank with this very dark colored, rich red wine, they're kind of the same thing, right? The lamb shank is this big, heavier piece of meat, and this is kind of a heavier wine. So that's texture with texture.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think they're kind of even when it comes to their flavors and their dominance. And I don't think that you want one kind of standing out over the other.
But there's also a school of thought that says you have to have some contrast.
Yes.
So what would be a contrasting food and wine pairing for this wine?
I think adding the mushroom to this one would kind of give it that earthiness sort of background to it, kind of play off of the spice a little bit as well and kind of calm that down maybe.
I got to taste the wine again just to be,
get on board with me.
Just to be diligent here.
Yeah.
I gotta taste the wine again.
I think you should.
I want to check on the acidity of this wine because, acidity is funny. There's acidity in wine, and acidity can sometimes wreak havoc with food and vice versa. Like if you try and pair wine with something that's a little bit too acidic, like people say, oh, you can't pair a wine with salad because salad dressings have vinegar and vinegar is ruinous for wines. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that?
You say, well, cheese goes great with wine. And if I happen to add a nice creamy cheese to that salad, or if I were to roast some corn and add that to the salad and have that as one of the ingredients, I think it would go just fine.
This wine's not highly acidic. It's actually No. It's got a nice finish, but not too acidic. It's actually, I think it's ready to drink now. I have a few of these in my cellar.
Oh, wow.
Quote unquote.
Where'd you find this wine?
I don't know. Somewhere on the internet.
Okay.
I spent a lot of my off hours just searching
Ordering wine or searching
Not ordering wine.
Oh, okay.
You'd be surprised. For me, it's more about shopping.
Okay.
Finding wines that I didn't know existed, and then finding wines that I didn't know existed that are actually pretty amazing.
Okay.
Not too expensive.
Yeah.
This was under $30.
That's awesome.
It's pretty good.
It's really good.
I'll mention it in the show notes. So if you're listening and you want
put
to
a link, would you?
Exactly.
That's the thing
you want
do
a
now.
link?
Yeah, put a link.
I don't know that I can do that, Scott.
No,
the technology might be beyond me. I mean, the fact that we're sitting here talking into microphones in the vendor's room at a winery and people are listening to it. And
put a link in the bio, would you? Isn't that a thing?
Link in bio?
That's Instagram, sorry.
There is a link in bio in my Instagram to get to the podcast. Let's talk about the life of a private chef. You started cooking for families after leaving Lark Creek.
Yes.
And then the pandemic came along.
Did
that put a wrench in everything?
It kind of did, yeah.
So what happened when you left Lark Creek?
I left Lark Creek.
Did you start getting phone calls?
I did get a few phone calls. The first phone call I got was from one of our regular customers that dined in the restaurant for lunch 4 to 5 times a week.
Wow.
Big developer in Walnut Creek. He had a project going on out in Walnut Creek that he wanted bounce some ideas around with, maybe possibly run the food service operation there.
Wait, it was a restaurant?
It was going to be a restaurant at a skilled sports training center for youth sports.
You could have brought back your famous mac and cheese.
No, that's not.
For the youths?
for the Utes.
Utes.
Maybe so.
The Utes
That's
love mac
one.
and cheese.
That's one of the complicated parts of this project that came up. What the person wanted was protein-fueled food that you would serve, college athletes that are training and trying to
Lamb
build
shanks
muscle.
with Sirah.
But at the same time, feed their families, because these are youth sports, feed the parents and feed the families that are dropping the kids off and hanging around too.
Oh.
So yeah, it was a lot of back and forth, but it was fun, and it was right off the beginning, and I wasn't doing anything anyways. So that was kind of the first thing that happened to me. Secondly, I put together a flyer. I thought about website, but didn't go that deep. So I'm, grassroots marketing sort of thing. I visioned myself going out to Blackhawk, which is a very affluent community up in where I imagined lots of people have private chefs.
John Madden lives out there.
Yes.
I knocked on his door. He'd be like, "Welcome in,
Well,
chef.
no,
What
I
are
was
you gonna
gonna-
cook for me?"
I was going to make these flyers and put them out on cars at the plastic surgery center, at the Andronico's shopping center, which is like even more higher price than Whole Foods.
Sure.
I was going to bounce around and go that way.
Right.
So anyhow, I posted this flyer on my Facebook, and my wife shared it on her Facebook, and it showed all of these things that I could do, meal prepping, small parties, all of this stuff that a private chef at the time I visioned would do. And so the first answer that we got was from her, get ready for this, her ex-boyfriend's parents.
Okay.
So she was dating this young man a few months before she met me, and she reached out and she said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. We loved Lark Creek. We would love to have Scott come to our house and cook for us." I set up a dinner party for them for like 8 people. It went great. I prepped everything ahead of time, had it kind of staged up like I had my station set up in a restaurant. So if I was making, yes, my mise en place, everything in order. So if I was making potato cakes with filet mignon, my fillets were already butchered, my potato cakes were already made.
Right.
I show up 2 hours before and kind of set up and make hors d'oeuvres. One of the guests at her dinner party was a gal that pours wine at this winery that we were tasting, the Dante Robere Purgatorio. She's a wine pourer and wine taster there. She mentioned me. She said, this food is amazing. These appetizers are amazing. The chef that they have there right now that's doing this release party is horrible. I would love for you to come out and meet the owners. So I came out there, and long story short, I've done 15 release parties for them at this point. And so my business just started to grow from word of mouth and situations like that.
So how many families did you cook for at some point?
At one point, I was cooking for 3 different families a week. Some of them I would do the shopping and prep meals for them and kind of leave it in their fridge so they're able to reheat it throughout the week.
Okay.
And then another family that I met, I actually would cook and serve them dinner on Tuesday and Thursday nights.
Wow.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. They're a really nice, generous family. I'm so glad that I met them. And if it wasn't for COVID, I would still be at their house cooking for them 2 days a week. They'll throw a little small party once a quarter, once every 3 months, and I'll do that for them also.
So COVID comes along, all these families where you have people living in, the East Bay, but they commute into the city for these jobs and they make lots and lots of money. Now they're at home.
Right.
They don't need you anymore.
I am still cooking for 2 of them each week, and I just cook and I deliver to them. It is a little bit more of a hassle as far as obtaining all of the products and then going back home and cooking. It's good to keep in contact with these people. I've been cooking for them for a few years now. They're very generous. The winery is kind of up and going again, which is great. We missed 2 events during COVID. And then it's starting to bounce back a little bit.
I see it coming around. I mean, we're starting to see more traffic here, especially on Saturdays. Saturdays are nuts here.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when I pulled up and all I saw was a car with a Seahawks license plate frame out there.
There it was.
Yep. I knew I was in the right spot at that point.
God.
So yeah, private chefing, it will come back.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah. It's but as far as the last 5 years, it's been great because it's afforded me so much more time than I would normally have. And able to still kind of make ends meet.
And you get to go on vacation.
Right. I get to go on vacation. Exactly. The only emails I have to answer are people requesting parties, which is great.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's been good.
Thank you so much for hanging out.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go meet Deepak.
Great. Yes. He was guest 1 and 3.
Very good, man. You studied.
I'm on this podcast.
You studied.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's going to be weird when you listen to your own episode.
I know, it will be. But I'm sure I'll be back because it's going to blow up after this.
Let's hope
just
so.
be ready.
Let's
put it out there.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of that. You got to put it out there and envision what you want to happen with this.
Are we going to go viral?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'm feeling it. Oh, it feels good.
Absolutely.
The Tall Mike Wine podcast was conceived and is written, produced, and maintained by yours truly. The show is recorded on a program called Audacity. The theme song was written by Jeremy Marzin. If you have questions, comments, suggestions for guests, if you'd like to be a guest, send me an email. Tell me why. tallmikewine@gmail.com. You can tweet at me at tallmikewine69. For some more wine geekery, check out my Instagram feed at tallmikewine. And don't forget the coasters. Send me an email. This offer is limited. Thanks for listening to the Tall Mike Wine Podcast. Cheers from the Vintner's Room.